Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to another bullshit in video games. We're here with Chris again. How you doing, man?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing good.
See, I didn't forget the intro.
You didn't. Last time we got the intro in like the last 20 minutes of the podcast.
I'm forgetting the intro a solid like 60 or 70% of the time. So it's alright. People have to be used to it. At this point, people are used to it if they're listening to these.
We've already been talking for what, 3 hours?
Yeah, something like that.
So, like, we've just been talking about regular, everyday life stuff.
Sometimes I forget to intro, sometimes I forget to just turn on the podcast. You know. So how's it going, man?
It's going good. Just still figuring out school stuff, dealing with the the Canadian embassy and consulate, trying to get them to call me back and not getting anything from them.
They're pretty lazy. We talked about how I also think that the American consulate is pretty fucking worthless. I can't believe my tax dollars pay for that shit.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? That's something you hear adults say when you're a kid.
And you just couldn't understand it.
You don't understand it. And now as an adult, I'm so fucking angry. I can't believe my tax dollars are paying for that worthless consulate in Shanghai. I was just there last month. Fucking utterly worthless. If anyone listening works at that Shanghai consulate, you should be ashamed of yourself.
To be fair, you did say the people behind the glass.
To be fair, the people behind the glass, the people who I'm sure were American citizens, they were very good. Everyone else, the people that you actually have to deal with on a moment-to-moment basis, I'm pretty sure that they were Chinese employees.
So this is a weird
thing.
They
were shit.
Because in the Canadian consulate, when I went to do exactly what you were saying, getting a new passport, there was no one in the position. Like, the only guy who wasn't behind a piece of glass that I could talk to was the security guy when I went in there, when you have to go and give your phone and everything and pass through the metal detector. Other than that, everybody I talked to, like, they were all people who, like, this person was doing this job, and if you talk to them, they can answer any question about that and all.
I suspect
it's also a lot less busy than what you described.
Yeah, I suspect that I had too high of expectations. When I went in there, I was expecting a fucking red carpet treatment, velvet gloves and like servants. I was hoping that I would be picked out of like the swirling mass of Chinese people and be like, I'm American, and they're like, rescue that man. And then I'm like sipping champagne in a high-rise building or something. But no, you're in there with the dregs. You're in there with the non-Americans, which is the part that made me just so upset. I was in a waiting room for like 4 hours just to drop off paperwork, and 99% of the people in the waiting room were Chinese, getting visas in the same room that the Americans are in to get their new passports. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
I think the only thing I could think about that is like, how many Americans are you going to have in there every day? And I get that when you show up there, you were like, I'm an American, this is my embassy, my consulate, I want the special treatment. But
I am paying for it. There has to be special treatment.
Yes.
It's supposed to be. And I'm just dropping off paperwork. I'm not having like, these were families getting visas. Like, they were going up for like 30-minute interviews. It was a long process. There was only 5 counters, and they were not going quickly. We're talking about each counter is busy for half an hour at a time. Yeah. And so all I'm there to do is drop off paperwork. Here's my paperwork. Okay, goodbye.
Yeah, they should have a fast track. Like, I can see, like, at this place, you're applying for a visa, and this window's open to you, but if an American citizen comes in, they get fast tracked in front of the line.
They press a button, and whoever's standing at that window drops through a hole in the ground and gets burnt up in the lava.
The lava they have on the like 8th floor of this 28-story building, and you're on the 9th.
The 7th floor is just all lava for the American embassy to use.
For me, when I went to my Canadian consulate, there were only like 3 or 4 people in the entire consulate at the time who were like not working there, so it was just really easy. And like, from what you've said to me, like, it sounds like there were some people working behind the glass who knew what they were doing, and then other people who were working there who really had no idea.
Also just didn't care.
Or just didn't care.
When I went to pick it up, I was like, look, I'm an American citizen. You have my passport just on the other side of this wall. Can you give it to me? And they're like, no, you didn't come at the right time. I'm like, what do you mean come at the right time? I came from 1,000 kilometers away. I got here as soon as I could. Just give me my goddamn... I need it to exist in this country. It's not like an issue of what's the word? It's not like... This is absolutely necessary. Yeah, it's not an issue of convenience or whatever.
It's a necessity.
This is absolutely... I can't exist in this country without my passport. Just give it to me.
The passport is more important than you are in this country.
I already paid for it. I already did all the stuff. It's completely ready to go. It's my property. It's on the other side of this wall right here. There's a 4-inch wall in between me and my passport. Just give it to me. And they're like, no, you have to be here at 8 a.m. I'm like, for what reason? The place is filled with hundreds of people. Why are they not required to be here at 8 a.m. but I am to pick up the passport?
Yeah,
things like that just make me
there are certain times here where it's like there's no reason for this time to be the time.
There's only 3 consulates.
I'm not even talking just consulates. I'm talking in a bunch of around China and in general.
For this example specifically, there's only 3 consulates, I think: Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, maybe, or Shenzhen. Yeah. And so that means all the foreigners who don't live in those cities have to travel. So it's kind of unreasonable to give them a 90-minute window where they have to be there.
Yeah, or if you're going to do that, at least make it in the afternoon. Because then they could travel in the morning and be there.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It is completely arbitrary and it is completely unhelpful.
Yeah.
I know that
counterproductive.
It's completely counterproductive because that would mean you'd have to take an overnight train. You'd have to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's what I did. I took an overnight train, and I had to be there between 8 a.m. and 10:15 or something like that. I took a train and I got to the Shanghai train station at 10 o'clock, and I was able to get into the embassy almost 1 o'clock, 12:30 or so. And they basically just told me to fuck off. They're like, no, we can't help you, go away. And then later in the afternoon, they kept motioning to a number on the wall. They're like, this number calls the people behind the glass, the real fucking people who actually work there. But they won't be back until the afternoon, so come back in a couple hours and call them then. It's pretty infuriating. And then once I got one of those people on the line, they were completely understanding. They're like, oh, you're American? Yeah, just come right on through. And then I went to the security, and they had been messaged by the people behind the glass, and they just let me right through. And I took my passport. It was just as easy as I expected it to be, except with all the fucking security people. Fucking taxes. This is why Americans don't want to pay their taxes. All right?
It's not doing anything to help you.
Yeah. It's fucking irrelevant. If I pay 1% or 100%, my life is exactly the same. That's probably a really bad... it's probably a pretty misunderstood way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Anyways, we've been bitching about that all day.
Yeah, we've been bitching a lot. So I'm getting more and more honest with my students as I get closer to leaving China.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier.
I'm getting to the point where I'm willing to just have arguments with them. Because normally I'm not, because you say the wrong thing, you'll end up in a fucking gulag.
I don't think that is just... You may not have that student come back the next time.
What? No, we're talking about university students, man.
Yeah.
No, they've complained to me before. Sorry, not to me. They've complained to the administration before that I deviate from the course material from the textbook.
What course material?
They give me a textbook.
Oh, you were given a textbook.
It's quote unquote all right. Let me be clear. The textbook is about 100 pages long, and it covers European and American history.
Wow. Must be pretty in depth.
I think it's also North American. It's just European and North American history. So the American section of the book is 20 pages. One of the pages in the table of contents would be American economy, and then you switch to that page, and it's 1 paragraph.
Wow.
So yeah. So when I deviate from a course material, even a little bit for a conversation, my students complain to the administration.
Wow, that's whenever I've worked, I worked at a university. To be fair, it was only 1 year, but I didn't have any. The only book that I used was a book that the other, because I took over a class for another teacher, and he was like, "This is the book I told them to get, and we've been using." And it was just a generic, English book that he had picked up, one that he liked to use, and it had stories in there and then questions.
Okay.
And that was what we did.
I don't have a book for my ESS classes, my elective classes. I just make shit up. I just go in there and shoot the shit with them for 90 minutes. I can't be fucked. The administration doesn't care. The students don't care. So
it's shocking here.
It's difficult for me to care.
It's shocking how little some of these places care about what their job is. The universities... one of the reasons... I'm planning to go back to university here in China, and I'm a little scared just because there was when I went to Wuhan University the first time, there was a guy... And I went out and asked him, a foreign guy, and I was like, "Do you know where the student administrations building is? I want to ask them about classes." And he's like, "Oh yeah, no problem. I'm actually headed over that way too. So why don't we go together?" And so I sat with him and I'm talking, and he was on a 4-year degree, and he's been there an extra 2 years because one of the classes he took, or there was something with a dissertation, something like that, they won't let him pass. They won't let him pass. And so now he's like, he had a legitimate class where he finished and he did dissertation and he did all this. And now he's taking a PE class. And that's the last class he has to take. And so he's at school. He's still on a student visa. He's been there for 2 years. Last year he had no class. And right now for this next semester, he's taking a PE class once a week. Yep. There's no teacher. They show up and they play football.
I've met multiple students here, foreign students, who are in the exact same situation. This is the China University of Geosciences. It's a geology university, okay? The people who come here study fucking geology. However, you're not allowed to graduate from China from a Chinese college without taking relatively advanced Chinese classes. You must. Even though all these students here are fucking geologists, they must take relatively advanced Chinese classes, and they must pass them with good grades.
What? So even it doesn't even if matter. It's offered in English?
It doesn't matter. And you reminded me, I just saw a good Egyptian friend of mine on campus last week, and I was like, why are you still here? You graduated. And he's like, no, I didn't. They won't let me. Because he passed his dissertation, and then he got a paper published, or however it works in the scientific world. He got a paper published, and that was his requirement to graduate. And then his teacher came and said, I changed my mind. One's not good enough. Publish another one. And I asked him, I'm like, well, is 2 going to be good enough? And he's like, well, I'm not sure. I have no idea. So he's like, so I'm doing a whole nother paper right now, but I have no idea if the college is going to find 2 acceptable, so maybe I'll have to do 3. Maybe they're just keeping me here to make more money off me. I don't know.
Because that's the thing. Even if you're here and you're only taking one class, you're not paying by the class. You're paying by the semester.
Yeah. The school offers me. I'm allowed to take the Chinese classes here for free since I'm a teacher. And last year I took their classes, and there's all filled with foreign students in the Chinese class, and that's where I learned it because I asked them, I'm like, why are you guys taking Chinese classes? Like, you guys geology students, and your teachers speak enough English that it doesn't matter. And they're like, oh, it's part of our curriculum, and it's not an option. We have to take them, and we have to pass them. If you fail the Chinese class, then you don't get your geology.
Everything degree. I saw on the Wuhan thing was like, in the Wuhan University, was like, this course is offered in English, so you don't have to have Chinese.
Have you looked at the required, like the general education stuff? I bet you there's some Chinese language in it.
I haven't seen
That's what the foreign students explained to me. Every single one of them has to take Chinese classes.
Well, and that could be too. Like, that might not even be a rule of China. That just could be something this university has set out. Every university could be like they can. It seems the regulation isn't all there. Like, if you go to Canada or in America, if the school started screwing around and giving you weird things, you could go to like a central education board and be like, "What is this that they're giving me?"
Yeah, theoretically, you could go above them probably. Yeah. That's the thing about China, though. There's so much regulation, and it's just enforced at will by whoever has the power. If they care enough to enforce it, it's enforced. Yeah. If they don't care, then it doesn't matter. Yep. So it might be the rule everywhere, but they just might not do it at Wuda, but they do it here.
Yeah, enforcement here is like the biggest issue is not having laws here. It's the enforcement of those laws.
Yeah, I would say that China has more laws than most countries, but just none of them are enforced. They're all ignored, so it feels very lawless.
Yeah. Well, like there's even what happened to me the other day, like because I'd forgotten to register, and I go to register after having not done it for a while because I didn't know I needed to, and then I get in there and I have to, like, it's not my official criminal record, but because I didn't register, I had to go through and they took my fingerprints, they took my palm prints, they took a DNA sample, they took
I've never
my
done
shoe
that before,
prints.
thankfully. They haven't taken DNA.
They did everything, and it took all day, and it was ridiculous. Like, they took phone contacts, they took all this stuff, and then my friend who's been here...
So they got my contact?
No, they didn't get yours. It ended up, like, because my phone wouldn't work.
Perfect.
So we ended up using... But even then, it wouldn't...
I was going to say, you should have forced them to torture you.
I don't have you... like, it was just phone contacts.
Wouldn't they take WeChat?
No, they didn't take WeChat. It was just phone contacts. Damn. So, I don't have your phone number on my phone.
Who calls people anymore?
Yeah.
What year is it?
But then, another friend went through, and he was in the exact same situation that I was, and had done exactly the same thing, and he was in and out in half an hour. They didn't actually... But it was... It's just one of those things. It's like, basically, if you get the guy who is really thorough and wants to do his job well, you're going to have to go through this stuff. But if you get a lazy guy, you're fine.
The lazy bureaucrats are always the ones you want.
Because they just don't want to deal with all the extra paperwork.
Yeah. They just sign it or stamp it or whatever.
And I'm and the thing was, I could see if I had gone to talk to any other of these, anyone else in these places, I don't think I would have had to take so long. It was just the one guy I chose to talk to was like really thorough, and he was the one going around telling the people, "You got to do this, you got to do that," and they're just like, "Oh, why do we have to do this?" I can hear them saying that in Chinese because they didn't think I understood.
That's like when you go to a bank. The moment you walk in, they're like, "Oh fuck! I hope he doesn't want anything."
I hope he's just here to look around. And,
yeah, the ATMs are over there. Go away from us. I walked in the bank the other day wanting to change RMB into dollars, and it took 3 employees, and it took about an hour of my time. And it turns out what they were trying to explain to me is that foreigners are only allowed to pull 500 RMB forever, for the history of your account. So I have an ICBC account at this one over here, and this was only explained to me when another Chinese person who was waiting in line behind me came up and explained what they were talking about.
500 RMB?
$500.
Oh, $500.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
So she explained it, and they all agreed with her explanation that I'm allowed to turn enough RMB into dollars to make $500, but then never again can I ever exchange money there.
That's ridiculous.
I have to shoot. They were like, "There's a China merchant bank down the street. You can get more money from there." I'm like, so I have to go to a separate bank, and they'll probably have $500 limit as well.
There was never that limit before.
There was. I actually remember that when I was China Construction Bank my first year here. I got money exchanged, and I had the same fiasco go on.
I've never heard that. I have exchanged money, and I exchanged for like $800, $1,000. My friends exchanged for like $2,000 because there was 2 of them. And
you were doing it yourself or through a Chinese person? Because through a Chinese person, there's no limits. They said explicitly it's because I'm a foreigner. If I was a Chinese person, there'd be no limits. I could change any amount. China, classic. So after sitting there for 2 hours and wasting the time of almost every employee in the bank, I left empty-handed.
Really?
Because I needed my passport and like 10 other documents to make my own money into a different currency.
I do remember that.
It's like it's my money in my account. Just change
That's
it
one
into
thing
dollars.
I don't like. It's like they don't want the money to leave the country. It's like, well, then why did you hire a foreigner? Many foreigners who come here are coming here and working here, and then sending money home.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna and I can remember one of my friends was complaining about that. She said every month they would send money home, so they'd go to the bank to send money home, and every month they needed a different form.
Yep.
And they would come in this month, and then it'd be like, okay, we brought all the forms, and they'd be like, no, you don't have this one, and she's just like,
But we
didn't need that last week.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is here, because I can remember it was 4 years ago now, back when you could still change visas in Hong Kong, because like now you have to go back to your home country
to change your visa.
You used to be able to go to Hong Kong to do it, but I went to Hong Kong to change my visa, and so basically I got off the train, went straight to the consulate to do my visa change, and I get in there, and the girl's like, I sit down and I give her all my papers, and she's like, "Where's this form?" And I'm like, "What form are you talking about?" And she's like, "If you want to change your visa into a work visa, you need this form. All foreigners have to have this form to get the work visa." And I'm like, and I was getting a little angry because I was like, we have been talking to an agency for weeks. We have been making sure all the documents are in order. Why didn't they mention that? And she's like, "Oh, well, they should have." And so I go home and I call my boss, and he's like, "I've never heard of this form, and I've been living here for years.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this." He's like, "All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go home, or you're going to go to your hotel. You're going to wash. You're going to clean yourself up. And then tomorrow you're going to go back, and you're going to put on your nicest clothes that you have with you. You are going to put on cologne. You were going to get your hair done.
Wash your balls.
You were going to do all that stuff, and you were going to go in, and you were just going to make sure you go to another window and give them the papers."
Just a new employee.
New employee.
And it worked?
Did that, and it worked perfectly. It's ridiculous. Like, literally, they can say you need this form, and like, I swear to God, she's just making things up because she didn't want to deal with it. Because if I didn't need that form, then where are you getting the name? Like, if I needed the form, I could see if you had a list of them. But otherwise, what form are you bringing up? Like, a form that even the people, like, I called my boss, and he was like, "I've never heard of that. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. And he's calling, like,
his
the
lawyer.
people he's calling lawyers. He had a lawyer. He knew some of the people in the citizens home here where you get your residency permit, and so he was calling them because they're the people who have to sign a lot of these forms when you want to go get your visa. And he called them and he gave them because they had a number they had given me. I had written down the number and I told my boss, and they're like, that form doesn't exist. Like, we've never heard of it. Maybe we've never heard of that form. And of course they've got all the forms that they could have, and they're like, we've never heard of this. And if it's a form that we would need to sign, we would have heard of it before.
Yeah, it becomes a mess really quickly. I've had to deal with lawyers multiple times here. I actually have two lawyers, one in Wuhan and one in Hong Kong. And I used to consult with them when I was still trying to do business here. And I've gotten to the contract phase of multiple businesses, but then they all fell through. But something I've learned in my time in China is that it just means nothing.
Contracts are
just if you're a foreigner, it just means nothing. And my lawyers have had to explain that to me multiple times, where I'm paying the lawyer, so like they don't really care, but I'm forcing the lawyer to go through all these steps of like verification and things that would be considered pretty normal business practices in America. And every now and then my lawyer will stop me and be like, wait, like, you understand this doesn't mean anything, right? You know you're a foreigner. You know this, it doesn't matter what this contract says. It doesn't matter what this clause is. It doesn't matter what they sign or what they stamp. It doesn't matter. You're a foreigner.
It doesn't just matter. It's not just for foreigners. Like, the contracts don't matter in China in general.
They matter for Chinese people.
No, they don't. Because I worked at a school and the Chinese teachers had a contract that was good for 2 years, all of them. And what happened was the bosses suddenly did, like, they hadn't been paid for 6 months. 6 months they haven't paid the Chinese teachers.
Did those Chinese people hire lawyers and sue the boss?
No.
So that's their fault then?
No, but here's, like, let me finish.
All right. They didn't pursue
the Chinese, like, what happened was they hadn't been paid, and then the bosses came down and gave them a new contract, and they said, sign this or you're fired. And the new contract was a lower pay wage, and then they were going to back pay them all those 6 months at that lower wage.
Yeah.
And then when the Chinese teachers said, we're not signing that, they fired the entire teaching staff.
Yep. So I read this book called China Employment Law Guide by Grace Yang my first year here. It was given to me by a guy who owns a business here in Wuchang, or it was recommended to, I should say. And it's a Hong Kong lawyer who writes the book in English, and it's a book for foreigners to understand Chinese employment law. And Chinese employment law actually is airtight. It's incredibly protective of employees. And she says multiple times in the book that most Chinese businesses would collapse if the employees understood their rights, because they would all just turn around and start suing their bosses.
Really?
So all those Chinese employees you just talked about, all of them had cause to sue. And apparently the courts always favor on the side of the employee. It's incredibly difficult for the employer to win the lawsuits.
Wow, I did not know that.
The protections for the workers are extremely tight. It's just that no one knows their rights here, so they all get fucked over. That's what she kept saying in the book over and over again. Everyone should read that book. It's super depressing. The laws are ludicrous. They're fucking outrageous. They're so ridiculous that if I owned a business here, I would put every employee on a 3-year contract and I would fire them after 3 months. I would do that out of necessity to protect my business. Because you get a grace period where you can fire an employee for little or no cause, and it's determined by how long the contract is. And so the 3-year contract is the longest contract you can sign, which has the longest grace period of 6 months. During that period, you can fire them for pretty normal stuff, like you could fire somebody in the West for, like they're just bad at their job, or they don't get along with their peers or things like this. But after that grace period is up, there's almost no way you can fucking fire them unless you like catch them stealing your money.
Even if they're just sitting at they're not even talking to customers or anything.
It doesn't matter how bad an employee they are. That's not cause to fire them. They'll take you to court, and you'll end up having to pay them still their salary. Also, if they sign 3 consecutive contracts and finish all 3 of them successfully, then you owe them pay for the rest of their life. You owe them pension.
Even if they go to the next job?
Yep.
Wow. I think we talked about that.
Read that book. It's depressing as shit. It literally makes you want to never ever start a business in China. But none of the Chinese employees are aware of these rights, and so they don't pursue anything. And so Chinese business continues being a shit show where everyone gets fucked over. If you refuse to pay an employee, not only do you owe them that pay, but they're allowed to pursue other work, and you still owe them that pay until you close the case legally. And so, let's say I'm working for you and you stop paying me. I can immediately start looking for another job, get hired at another job, and then work that other job. And every month that you don't pay me, you owe me that plus extra. I forget what the extra is. It's like a certain percentage. And then if that goes to like a 12-month period, then you owe me even more. You get penalty even higher. So like if you stop paying me, I could just go find another job and then 6 months later hire a lawyer and you'd pay me like a year's salary. You'd be forced
That's ridiculous.
You have to pay all sorts of penalties. Don't quote me on these. I read this book 3 years ago, but go read it. It's shocking. It's the protections for the employees are out of this fucking world. A friend of mine, his wife actually just got fucked over with like maternity leave or something like that, or bonuses, and so they're taking her company to court. And so I'm curious to see how that turns out for them. If this book is to believe, then they should win easily.
That's crazy.
It is, man. It is. Anyway, let's talk about some video games.
Yeah, let's talk about something.
Let's talk about something that I know that you want to talk about and that you've been talking about to me for years. You've always wanted to build sort of a nerd wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A nerd. Yeah.
Want to explain what that is to people listening?
Nerd wall. Basically, if you've ever seen any gamer on YouTube, chances are they had exactly what I'm talking about. And a nerd wall is just a wall full of video games and video game memorabilia and anime stuff. And so, like, chances are, if you can think of any video game related thing, they're gonna have some form of nerd
any
wall.
like talk show or stream or anything like that. They'll have
Like,
a bunch of shit in the
If
background.
you think like Markiplier doesn't really have one, but he just has this dark panel behind him. But you think of like the Completionist. He has, every time when he starts the show, he's talking to you, and behind him, what do you see? A wall full of video games and sometimes some statues from various things.
TFS does that as well.
Yep.
And
TFS has that.
DeFranco has sort of a nerd wall behind
Well,
him.
DeFranco has a wall with some like statuettes and stuff like that, but it's not quite. That's
Also,
not
I think it's a studio. I don't think that's his home.
Yeah, it's not his home. That's just he's got some decoration on his wall.
Yeah.
So but like I'm talking about like a nerd wall that's specifically full of. Stop it.
Sorry, I'm playing with a spear right now, everyone. So I might be a little bothersome.
But yeah. So
Jerry almost got me in the gut with this last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, he almost speared me like a wild pig. God damn. This thing's made of wood, but it's scary when it's coming at you. It's fucking out of the darkness. Anyway, go on about your nerd wall.
Yeah, so I've for a long time I've wanted to do that. For a while, at the beginning when I saw it, I was like, I don't know if I'd want to do that because I didn't like acknowledging that I was a nerd back in the day.
Repression, the nerd repression.
And then now I've just been like, why wouldn't I want that? You know.
Yeah.
So mine's coming along. I've got some Funko Pop figures.
What's Funko Pop?
Funko Pop are those little like chibi style figures that they're making for basically everything.
Yeah, they are.
And I've got a few of those.
Fucking everything.
And then I've got just some things that I found. Like I got some Doctor Who stuff. I've got one thing I was actually really glad to find. I don't know if you've ever heard of the anime Card Captors.
No.
But it was one of the first animes I watched, and when I was a kid, and I loved it. Absolutely adored it. It was a story about this girl who finds this book, and it has all these cards, and she takes one out, and the rest of them get thrown, like they just suddenly whoosh out in this big gust of wind.
Okay.
And she gets this guardian comes out and tells her basically what happened. This is a book of magic cards created many years ago by this guy, and they've all gotten out, and she has to go.
Did she grab a good one? That first one?
Yeah, she grabbed one of the 4 elemental cards. And that was like
so it's like one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Classic.
And so
what if she just picked the worst one?
Yeah. There are ones in there that if she had picked those, it's like, well, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's like the smelly toe.
She picked like the windy card, which had the power of winds, which can be used. But anyways, her whole thing was she had to go now and recapture the spirits and put them back in their cards. And I bought, it's called the book of Clow, or the Clow book or something like that. And I bought that, and that's sitting on top of my shelf. And I was really glad to find that because it was really great anime. And then I just got some like Zelda things. And
do you know how you structure the shelf? Is it gonna be a bunch of shelves? Is it gonna be a bookcase? Is it gonna be like
I have
hanging stuff?
I have a desk. Like I had a desk that I had before that was really small, but it had this 3x3 squares like shelf.
Yeah.
And I was using that, and now I've got a new desk which is much bigger, but I took that shelf off because it's just it wasn't attached to the desk, it just sat on the desk, and I put that on top of my new desk, and that's where all the stuff's going. And it's coming along. Not quite done yet, and I need to actually take everything off and clean it a bit, but
I want to make one too, but I want it to be in the corner. I don't want it to be a flat wall. I want to be in the corner of a room.
Eventually, I want to have a nerd room. Like, I want to have a room you walk in and there's shelves of games and statues. And
this is my virginity room.
Yeah, very much, man.
Welcome.
Things that are going to my girlfriend will never go into that room.
Perfect. Get some goddamn privacy. Oh, man. Are you going to be able to retain that stuff if you have kids? That's what I worry about. I worry about losing who I am when I have kids.
Oh, I will. See, here's the thing with me. Because I love cartoons and things like that, I have a list of things that when my kids get old enough, I'm going to start showing them cartoons.
Yeah,
and I'm going to show them these games. Like Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Star vs. the Forces of Evil.
Yep. Transformers, Beast Wars, Dragon Ball.
Oh, yeah. I actually just rewatched Transformers, Beast Wars 3.
It's crazy, right?
So good.
Yeah.
Reboot.
I love that they use guns, like actual guns, like separate from their bodies.
It's one of those things, like, whenever I watch those shows now, you can't help but it's just like, God, for robots, they have such horrible aim.
Yes.
Like, I know that it's for the, they don't want to have it be too violent or something for that kids, and they, like, if the robots actually shot the way they should, those battles would be over, and, like, it'd just be, like, one shot,
No one would ever miss. What about Zoids?
Oh, Zoids! That was the one where they ride, like, the big... He's riding the lion.
It's like Gundam, but all of the Gundams are animal shaped.
Yeah, and they don't fly through space. It's all on the.
It's all on the ground, yeah. And all the animals, the animals' armament is based on the type of animal. So like the turtles are artillery and stuff like that.
And then it wasn't the one like the guy who was like the main character had the Liger or something.
Yeah,
like
the Liger. He was the one of a kind.
Oh, that was such a good one. I thought it was supposed to continue, but it stopped after like the first season, and then after that, I was like, oh, let's look at the next Zoids, and it didn't have anything to do with the. Even though they had said there would be continuation, I could be misremembering.
What's a good anime that you've watched recently? Because I need some new ones.
I haven't watched anything you haven't already seen.
Okay. The last thing I watched was Code Geass,
which was good.
Yeah, I just watched that recently. I know it's an old show, but I finally had access to the whole show and watched it. Great ending.
Yeah, the ending was just it was epic because it really kind of brought him like
spoiler
alert. It brought him back from because being the villain into actually like being the villain that history would put him as the villain, but he wasn't.
I would actually have liked it, I think, more if he would just stayed as the villain the whole time.
It's one of those things like either one could have been interesting because if he had gone to the villain, you could totally see him going power crazed. But like the fact that he went to the villain so that he could in the end be defeated, like he became the villain so that there would be a villain to overthrow.
Yeah,
was also like it was still a very good. It was
very well done.
Yeah,
I agree. What about Death Note? You like that?
I haven't finished Death Note. I got up to it got up to a point like after he kills L.
I think it was a little maybe too long of a series.
Yeah, like after
it's the same thing as Parasite. I think I should have ended it sooner.
Yeah, I never got into Parasite. I heard a lot about that one, and that was Parasite the one that also had the game. There was that's Parasite Eve, and it was all about. I played a bit of that, and it was all about.
Eve Online kind of thing?
No, not Eve Online, but Parasite Eve it's another Parasite type story, kind of in the vein of like Resident Evil, I think.
Okay.
And I didn't I remember watching it when the first one came out, watching previews and wanting to play it. My parents going, fuck no, you ain't touching that game.
Too crazy.
Yeah, it was too crazy. But then I played the 10th anniversary game, but I couldn't follow what was going on because it was not the original remake. It remade. It was just a game that was in the timeline, so I was just like, I have no idea what is happening in this.
Yeah. What are some underrated shows that you think everyone should watch?
I don't know about.
I think Outlaw Star doesn't get enough credit. Like Cowboy. See, I see
Cowboy Bebop.
You look right. You don't even know what I'm talking about.
I know. I've heard of Outlaw Star, but I can't think. I haven't seen it.
Exactly.
Cowboy Bebop, I've seen most of it.
Cowboy Bebop, fantastic show. Outlaw Star came right before it, and it's a very similar theme, where it's like, space cowboy kind of bullshit. But Outlaw Star came first, and it was... I think Cowboy Bebop was better, just more refined, better quality. But Outlaw Star really had its moments. It was really good. It's a classic for me. What about Big O? You ever watch that?
No. I haven't
Really?
seen Big O.
The guy in the suit with the giant robot that fights monsters?
No, I've never heard of Big O.
Big O! And the name of his giant robot was called Big O.
I have never seen that.
Damn, man. That's some old school Adult Swim shit.
Haven't seen Big O.
Huh.
I would say, like, I don't know that it's not an underrated one because it's very well known, but you need to watch Gravity Falls.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I've mentioned it to you because it's definitely a kid's show, but I actually have been watching that one again just recently, and the jokes, there's so many jokes in there that, like, and there's scenes in there, like, where you're like, wow, this is a kid show? Like, did they just, like, make that joke? Because there's some jokes that you're like, I'm so glad my kid won't get that. Like, There's a bunch of jokes about, like, the amount of jokes about people dying is crazy in that show. And then you think, like, the big culmination, the guy that they're fighting, Bill Cipher, like, his storyline is he obliterated his entire universe and only let the crazies and the monsters survive, and now he wants to come to ours and do the same thing. So it's so well done. And I mean, I think you're gonna really like Seuss, one of the characters. When you watch it, just let me know what you think of Seuss, because he's an adult he's dumb. He's not really smart, but he's just so funny.
Okay. Are you sad that Adventure Time ended?
I am very sad that Adventure Time ended. I am distraught. I loved it. I think it had so much more it could have done.
Yeah.
I get that it's one of those things, like, if they're bored writing, they didn't want it to keep going, but I remember reading an article because I was like, why are they stopping? Are they going to move on to a new thing? Like a new Adventure Time theme thing? But he said he was getting bored. He didn't want to do it anymore. And I was like, I can't understand that, but at the same time, I can't understand why. Yeah. But I can understand.
You're just consuming it though. Like, he might be working 20 hours a day on it.
The last couple seasons of that didn't come out. Like, they didn't come out in any regular time. Like, it took them a while to get the end of season 10 and all that.
Well, they wrote such a fantastical story. I mean, how much of the writing do you think was done just haphazardly, and then they ended up having to work plots together?
That's entirely possible.
And that's a really difficult process, obviously.
Well, and it's also true.
How many times did they make a decision just because it sounded cool, and then it was really difficult to make it?
And then you have to think about, too, like, in the beginning, the first 2, 3, maybe even 4 seasons, you can just have episode of the week. But then in the last few seasons, it really got to be like there were things that you had to remember that this had happened before.
There's a lot of connection and meaning.
A lot of connection and all that.
What's the kid's name? Finn.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
I'm Finn socks right now, man.
Dude, I haven't seen it in years. Oh yeah, you are. Shit, that's awesome. Man, I need to see that. Do you have it? I need to get it from you if you have any.
I have like up to season 8, maybe some season 9.
Okay, I need to grab all that from you. But
then I got Gravity Falls. I'll give you that too.
What the fuck was I gonna say? Oh yeah, he gets older through the seasons. That's one of the best touches in the whole show. He matures so much and he becomes so much more introspective. In the beginning of the show, he wants to like just eat pancakes and like fight monsters
and he's just doing kooky things.
Yeah.
Weird kooky
and
things.
like in the most recent seasons that I've seen, it's like super introspective. It's all about like the meaning of life and
like he wants to find his family. Like he found his dad. He wants to go find the other humans and dealing with relationships. And it was hugely. He grew. Like it was going from a child to a young adult.
It was very developmental. And like imagine if the writers never stopped doing it. Imagine if you just did it for like 20 years. You'd have a whole generation that grew up alongside Finn.
Yeah, that's true. I love
How many seasons are there?
There's 10.
Okay, so at least there are people who grew up watching 10 years of it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when you first showed that to me. The first episode I ever saw you showed me was
Wait, I showed you Adventure Time?
You showed me Adventure Time. You introduced me to Adventure Time.
Yeah.
And Dragon Ball Z Abridged.
You just reminded me because an old ex-girlfriend of mine showed me Adventure Time. Wow. I just assumed that you showed me all these things.
No, you showed me Adventure Time and Dragon Ball Z Abridged.
Wow. Oh yeah, Abridged is the fucking...
Because I remember the first episode that I ever saw, you showed me of Adventure Time. I don't know if it was the first one. It's the first one I remember was... it was called It's All Your Fault. And it was the one where the lemon grabs are starving.
Oh yeah.
And then because they keep making candy people. And that episode for me was just... I was sitting there going... What the fuck, man? Like, it was so weird. Yeah. I remember I actually wasn't that into it at first. And then I started watching some of the other episodes and I was like, this show fucking rocks. I love it. It's my favorite show.
Who's Lemon John at the end?
Yeah, Lemon John, the big guy.
Yeah. He says some, like, I love the really philosophical shit that they get into in the show.
Yeah.
Where at the end, he's weighing whether he should destroy the Candy Kingdom, which is what he was built to do.
And then get candy for his people.
Yeah. Or, like, in the one hand, he says, blah, blah, blah. And
on one hand, the candy people will suffer. Yeah. On the other hand, the lemon people will suffer.
What should I do? But
the only thing is to become component to all.
Component to all, yeah. He dissolves into candies.
Yeah. Well, then, like, because there were the two lemons, and later on, like, there's something happens, and so, like, one is, like, scrawny and skinny, and the other one's, like, huge and fat.
Yeah.
And he eats the other one, and then after that, there's just the one again, and it kind of goes from, like, it goes to where they're crazy scientists, then to, like, an extravagant tyrant lifestyle, and then down to where they're all, like, wearing, like, prison uniforms, and just every day is spent working making lemon candy.
Yeah.
And that's all of them, even the lemon.
I love the lemon people. They're so ridiculous. Oh, man, I need to watch that show again. It's been years.
I think another show I don't know if you'd like this one, but have you ever heard of Steven Universe?
No.
Steven Universe, for me, if a show's got a really good, like, even if the show isn't great, if there's something in the show that's really weird or interesting, I'm all for that. And Steven Universe is all about, there's these aliens that exist, they're gems. And each one is based on any gem you could think of in real life. Amethyst, diamond, pearl, all these things. And each one has a life form attached to it. And they're all magical life forms. They don't eat or anything. They live for thousands of years. And the way they reproduce is they'll, like, send things. They just go to planets. They conquer the planet. And they turn every resource and everything on that planet. And they fuel gems. And then once they're finished making gems, the planet is a dead husk and they move on. And so they went to Earth, but there was a whole rebellion, and some of the gems fought off the diamonds, who were the head gems, and lived on Earth. And the story is all about this boy whose mother was a gem who fell in love with a human. And what happens with gems is, like, everything about them is contained in their gem, whether it's in their forehead or whatever. And if they get too much damage, they turn into just the gem, and then they can regrow themselves later. But for her, she became pregnant with a human boy. And so, yeah, because she had a husband, but
it's called Steven Universe?
Yeah, Steven Universe. When she gave birth, she disappeared because her gem went in and became part of him.
Naturally.
Yeah, so
one does.
And it's just all about their life on Earth, because they're like outlaws from the main kingdom and all that, and it's all about what they do to try and protect Earth. And then it slowly builds until you find out who his mother really was and all this stuff that's going on and what happened to the gem world and all this. And it's... for me, it's just really cool because of the gems. The gems make it really interesting because they're the magic of this show. And they have all these different magics, and they can fuse together to create other gems, but that's really frowned upon. Like, they don't, like, on the gem world, they think
Do you think that you should move to Tokyo and just go full Super Saiyan nerd?
Oh, if I moved to Tokyo, that's exactly what I'd be doing.
Yeah, me too. Man, those 10-story arcades are hard to walk away from, though.
The thing about going to Japan is awesome to visit, but if you're going to Japan and you hear about those arcades, they are so awesome to see, but when you're there and you know you're just visiting, it makes it a little depressing because you're just like, you see these guys who come in and they'll plop their phone down on, like, this little scanner, and that'll give the arcade game all the data of their character, of their profile that they've been using, and now they can, so it's like having a PlayStation 2 with a memory card that you just take over to your buddy's house, except now all that data is on your phone. And when you put the phone down, scan the QR code, whatever, now you can load up your data and keep playing.
God damn it.
All the upgrades and stuff.
Yeah, I completely understand what you mean. You don't have the progression, and so it's hard to justify.
And so that also means that anytime you try to play, you have to play through the tutorial level every time.
Yeah. That Gundam game and the pods was so epic. They have these pods that you get into. It's like a little sphere. And inside, you have 2 pedals and 2 joysticks. And there's like a 180-degree screen all in front of you. That's like maybe half of the inside of the pod is a screen. And you're piloting a Gundam mech through a city, fighting other people and their Gundams.
Every game they had there. Like, I remember one I played, it was a shooter, and you had two pistol type things, controllers, and if you hooked them, like they had on the sides they had all these little grooves and things so you could hook them together. So if you put one controller behind the other and hooked it in, it was like a sniper rifle. And then if you attached them on the side, you had a machine gun. If you had the two just regular, you were shooting with pistols. And there was like 4 or 5 different ways you could combine these two controllers to pull out different guns. And I was just sitting there going, this is awesome! Why can I only play the tutorial level? Because you get like 3 guns. There's like 6 guns you can unlock later, and I get 3, and I can't use them all. And it was just...
Yeah, it's frustrating. Oh, you also love the card games there, right? You always wanted to play the card games.
Oh, the card games. And they had ones that was like... It was like take League of Legends, but combine it with a playing card game that you have to buy, and then a touchscreen pad. And I was just like, I watched some guys play it, and it was amazing. They took 3 different things, smashed them into one, and it worked. Like in this one, you cast your spell. You don't just click the mouse and point. You cast a wall spell. You draw where you want the wall to come up. If you can draw properly, you can make the spells do extra things and stuff like that. It was just, they were so innovative and so amazing. Yeah. Like you think of an arcade back home. There's one arcade in my hometown, and it's exactly what you would think of it if you're thinking of an arcade in America. It's a place where you go and they have pinball and they have
Crazy Taxi,
and they've got those games for tickets.
Yeah, the basketball game as well.
And then they've got a few they'll probably have like some NES games or Super Nintendo games there. But these were like VR games and shit like that, like things that just make you go, this is what an arcade should look like. But we have none of that back. And even here in China, they have more arcade games than we have back home.
In America, do you think they could support an arcade game?
I don't think
everyone owns computers and consoles and stuff. There's no reason to go to an arcade.
I think the problem is in America, like we had the same discussion when we were in Japan when we went, because we went together. Yeah. But we had that same discussion because like Japan and China have grown up on like arcades, for China especially.
Like net bars.
And like China has net bars, but arcades became a thing very recently. And for Japan, like they've got so many games out there that are like on the phone. Japan's video game industry is crazy. When you think about how interconnected everything is, like the games that we get in America, Canada, that we're like are continuations, like Resident Evil, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy. If you go to Japan, you realize that they have twice the number of games we have across. And for one game, like Kingdom Hearts is a perfect example. If you were a Kingdom Hearts fan in Japan, they had a game on the cell phone that was directly linked. And if you played on the network in Japan, you could get points by playing the game on your phone for all this. And like you could go to the arcade, and because you'd played on your phone, it was all interconnected. And America just doesn't have we've gotten out of arcades. They're very kiddish. Yeah. And they don't have
computers are cheap enough where everyone's just going to buy a computer if they're going to play computer games.
But there's also, in America, everything's very separate.
Yes.
Like, if you are designing a game for a phone, you've got to design for the phone. In Japan, they're like, all right, we have a phone, we have computers, we have consoles, and we have arcades. Let's design something that can go through all of them.
Yeah, everything connects together.
Everything connects together, and that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it could be done. It would have to be very...
I think the way they would have to do
it would be very different.
They would have to have huge marketing for it, and they would have to have something that they could bring in right away that like you could...
That you can't get elsewhere.
Yeah, you couldn't get elsewhere. And then I think if you're going to do the whole connecting between computers, arcades, and phones, it would have to be kind of incremental, because if you just were like, all right, we got the arcade game, the phone game, and the computer game, go. And it's like, well, I don't know which one to start with. You know, people get overwhelmed. Whereas if you come out and you're like, all right, we've got the computer game first for the people who like to do that. Now we're bringing out the arcade game. If you want to play this, you can get bonuses and all this, and they all interconnect. And like, I would love to go back and be able to play the Kingdom Hearts games and all the ones that came out in Japan as they came out.
Yeah, me too. Well, not Kingdom Hearts, but I'd love to go to Japan and play all those games as they come out. Yeah, man, it'd be tough. It'd be tough to not just spend every day in the arcade. Do you think you get sick of it eventually?
You probably would, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it feels like it'd be difficult to really get that deep into it without speaking Japanese.
That is the thing too. Like, in order
most
to
of the
do
games did not have English.
In order to do it in Japan, you would have to like really give your Japanese a lot. Like,
so what we need is a Jeff Bezos type character to start building 10-story arcades in America.
Yeah, we really do. and then get companies and so be like, all right, you guys are developing the phone game for this one. It's going to be an epic fantasy adventure. And you guys will develop the console game. You guys will develop the computer game. You guys make up like 4 different arcade games. One will be card based. One will be
live action or something. Real time strategy.
I mean, we could start to see something like that as VR becomes more popular. Like VR, maybe. I think in America, if you wanted to do it, you'd kind of have to combine it with VR and take it a step further.
Okay, so what about like a VR arcade?
Yeah. That's what I think.
Everyone's in their home. They're not at a physical location arcade. But what you're doing is, in the VR, you're going into an arcade filled with games, and you can play all these different games.
That could work. I was thinking more along the lines of you design games that would be for VR, but would kind of work in a similar way. Like if you're doing where you would have like the phone aspect of it, but then you could also go to the arcade and play a VR version of some of these games.
Okay.
Because like the thing in Japan, a lot of these games, like we would get versions of them that they'd make for like PSP, for example. Like Final Fantasy Dissidia is a good example. They had the PSP version, which is it's a Final Fantasy fighting game like Smash Bros. But when you go to Japan, Dissidia was this huge arcade game where you'd be playing and you'd be fighting against like 12 other people, and it was so much bigger than the PSP game was. So much bigger. Because PSP was 1v1, and that was it.
Yeah.
The original one. I don't know about the second one. I never played it. But I went and I played the arcade game there, and you level up your character, and you can keep your data saved on your phone, and then you can go and play, and you're playing against like 12 people or something like that. And it was awesome. It was so much fun.
So how can it be done?
I honestly don't know if it could be. Like I think it's
would,
one of the
Americans
things,
even be interested in it?
I don't think Americans would be like, that's the thing. In Japan and in China, that's very much part of the culture.
Yeah, and net bars.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really love about here is I think, like, because we have net bars back home. They exist.
No one uses them, though.
But
they're not popular.
They're not as popular, and they'll exist for a few months and then close down. Like, I would love for there to be net bars back home because I think it would be... I loved going to the net bars when we had them back home.
Yeah. Or here in China, even. I've never been to one except in China.
The only problem I have in China is I would love to have, like, the net bars, all the games, like, it makes sense, but they're all the games that people play in China, and there's a lot of them. But there's a lot of obscure games that some people like to play. But almost all the games that I would want to play aren't there.
Well, so here's part of the problem is because you know that all the games here are pirated. And so it becomes a very different business model when you actually have to pay a license for all these games, when you have to actually own all these games and use all these games. Here, you go into the net bar and you log onto one of the computers, and the computer has access to the local server, which just has 200 different pirated games on it, and you can play anything you want. It's different when you're in a country like America where it's not an option to build an entire business around pirated IP.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing is too, the net bars back home, one of the biggest things, like you would see some people playing like Call of Duty or something like that. But what did most people go to the net bars to play? An MMO. Whereas in China, MMOs aren't as big as they are back home.
No, they're not.
Like MMO was the first big thing that took over in China. I don't know what they're called. They're like League of Legends. They're called
MOBAs.
MOBAs, yeah.
Yeah, I can't stand MOBAs. I know we've talked about them a million times. They are the death of gaming.
I disagree.
They are insidious.
They
should be banned. They should be illegal. Mobile players should be hung.
I disagree. My problem with MOBAs is like, I love playing fantasy games and I love those games, but what did you like? Oblivion, for example. What's the best part of Oblivion? Working your ass off, playing hours and hours to get to the end to where you have an enchanted bow that does so much damage, so you're pulling it back and shooting an arrow and killing 12 guys in a row. Because it's got like fire damage. But this one, it's like that. You're always just starting over, and I just,
you're always doing the exact same thing. Just the amount of variables, the amount of variability is so low, it's a joke.
Well, and I think that's too because you're doing...
There's more fucking variables in Super Mario than in the top MOBA game.
Well, I think that's a result of the game type, because what do you need to do to win? There's a very set, like when you're playing, if you're playing
also
Oblivion,
when you talk to somebody who loves MOBAs, one of the arguments they'll make is, oh well, there's like 1,000 different characters. Well, every character just has the same 5 abilities. Every character has a movement ability. Every character has an AoE ability. Every character has a ranged attack ability.
And this one might have an ability that's like, this one will have a ranged attack that's does it a slightly different way, but it still ends up falling into the same category.
It ends up being so similar that there's almost no meaning in the whole thing.
And that's the thing, like when you play games like that, especially when you're trying to beat the other person, what are you trying to do? You're trying to find the best way to do it. And so it ends up getting to a point where the best ways are discovered, and that's the only way you really can play. And
at the end of the day, I'll acknowledge all games as being games and being a valid use of your time. If you
enjoy it,
if you enjoy it, if you don't regret spending your time, then it's not a waste of time. But don't tell me that MOBAs are a competitive game with fast-paced action and interesting creative decisions and shit. No, get the fuck out of here.
Well, anybody will say that about any game they play. And you would probably say that about a lot of the games.
But sometimes it's factually true, sometimes not.
I know, but there's probably people out there who would have the exact same reaction about Oblivion or something like that.
But that's not factually true, though. There's literally, an infinite amount of variables to Oblivion.
That's true. I wish my Oblivion was working.
Yeah, I'm done with it for a long
It's just
long time.
The problem I've had, Oblivion is my cursed game.
Yeah.
It's my cursed game.
Fable is my cursed game.
I cannot get it. Like, I cannot get to play it without having some kind of glitch come up. I have restarted that game so many times.
This is why we need AI, man. I think the day will never come where we have technology that just perfectly works. That just works. It doesn't have to do some amazing stuff. I don't need it to cure cancer. I don't need it to, make me a god. I just need it to do what I bought it to do. If I bought it to fucking play Call of Duty, I want it to play Call of Duty every time I ask it to turn on Call of Duty.
Well, I'm willing. My problem with I'm willing to accept, because you can't get around the fact that there are going to be
this microphone records audio. I just want it to record audio. That's why I bought it.
I know,
but this microphone gives me an audio glitch 40% of the time that I make recordings, which is why I have to have the audio waves on the screen. I have to watch it as we're talking, because it's audio glitched so many times that I recognize what the glitch looks like in the audio waves. And if I see it, I'll stop the podcast and restart all the software and unplug and plug everything back in. So this does one job. I just want it to do that job.
Well, and I think I understand that, but when we're dealing with technology stuff, you have to accept a certain level of there's going to be issues and
errors
stuff and errors. And when I bought my PS3, the very first one, it had a massive error. But I can remember, and that was the same thing too. People were complaining because there were thousands of PS3s that just didn't work. And it's like, you are aware that every product release has 1% to 2% are just going to be absolute failures.
Hey man, when the AI are doing all the programming, no more problems.
But that was the thing. People were complaining. I remember when the PS3 came out, there was huge outrage for the amount of PS3s that were not working. And I remember someone wrote an article, and they're like, you guys really, they were just like, these people need to shut up, because if you do the numbers, the amount of people who had this problem adds up to about 1% of the people who bought a PlayStation 3. So it's perfectly within the margin of having for a release.
I would still say it's unacceptable when 5 million people buy a system. 1% is still a fuckload of people who got fucked over.
Yeah, but the whole thing was, the only thing when mine screwed up, I took it back and got a new one. And it was immediately fixed. That was the thing. If your PS3 didn't work...
Is that enough, though? Because your time was wasted, your effort was wasted.
But I'm sorry, you can't sit there and go
You can't quantify those things, yeah.
But it's one of those things. You can't... nobody can sit there and say, I expect every single machine they release to be perfect. There's going to be mistakes made sometimes.
If 1% of Ford's cars just exploded when you turn the key in the ignition,
that's going to an extreme.
That would be way too many.
That's going to an extreme.
Yeah, it is extreme.
If the PlayStations were exploding, but even that, if the PlayStations were exploding, that's one thing. But even then, they've had batteries and stuff released that were exploding.
If 1%
the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. How many people had that explode?
Only in China. Have you noticed that every time China has a problem with another country, with a big company, suddenly that company's product is extremely defective?
I have not noticed that.
They have problems with Tesla a while ago, and then you have like 3 Tesla cars just spontaneously combust.
You
don't have Samsung batteries exploding in other countries. You don't have Teslas exploding in other countries.
You had some exploding in Canada.
Like 1. You had like 20 explode in the same week in China, right after China got angry at Samsung. I don't believe that it's a coincidence.
I don't know. I'm just saying. My point was having some, like 1% of everything when it's been like that since the dawn of time, or since they started producing things like this.
Yeah.
Going, like having problems. That's a happy margin. It's okay. It's 1%. If it was like 30% of their product had issues, 30% of the place, that'd be unacceptable. But it's like you have to accept that there's going to be some failures.
Well, is it enough for you to just get a replacement?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. All right, Fable is my cursed game.
Right.
The first time I got Fable, I think it gave me the 3 Rings of Death or something like that. And then I went back to GameStop, got a new copy. That copy was glitched. I couldn't get out of like the tutorial area. Went back and got another copy. That one was also glitched. Couldn't get out of the main city, which is where you spawn in right after the tutorial. Mm-hmm. And then I just gave up after that. I don't think it's acceptable for them to just keep giving me a broken product. It's not good enough.
But the thing is, too, that was something that was happening.
At a certain point, I need the new product and my money back.
Okay, that's fair. But that, like, for your thing, you got 3 broken products.
Well, you just said Oblivion's always been your cursed thing.
Yeah, but that has been...
No matter how many times you try it, it's always fun.
But that has been from different areas, and it's one of those things. Oblivion is also a game where I look at, and if you go online and you do any kind of research, you look at it, people say Oblivion is a game that actually has some significant glitches in it because it's such an open world game. So if you're going to purchase a game that has been proven to have those glitches and that you already know from the past it's going to have those, you can't sit there and go, this is bullshit, I hate this company because of this. You knew it was going to come.
I don't like that logic. Because that logic gets into the area of like forgiving Bethesda
I'm not
for
saying
76.
Forgiving Bethesda, I'm just saying you can't.
Or blaming the customers.
For me, with Oblivion, I'm sitting here going, I know it's had problems in the past, and it's an older game, and if it's still going to have glitches at this point, my buying it, there's nobody I can blame except myself. At this point.
Oh, did you buy a physical copy or did you buy it on Steam?
It was on Steam.
So how is there no one to blame at this point when you play a 15-year-old game and it's still fucked up? And you buy the most up-to-date version because you bought it from Steam. How is there no one to blame? How is Bethesda not directly to blame? You just gave them money for a product that's 15 years old, 14 years, count 2005. 14 years old, and they still haven't fixed any of the problems. And they're still making money from it because you just bought it.
I don't know. Again, that's a problem. If everybody was having that problem, fine, but not everybody is.
Well, you just said that since everyone's having that problem, it's acceptable.
No. There is... The problem that I was having wasn't with... My problem was with now is not with the game itself. It's with the computer version of the game.
Why?
Because the problem I was having before was I'd get to certain points in the game and they'd glitch. My problem now is it's a problem that they've said that they have... Bethesda tried to fix with the computer version. And they tried other patches that ended up breaking the game, and they tried to find it. We don't know what to do. We can't fix it. And the problem is, with some computer versions of the game, after a while, the autosave corrupts the files.
So I've never had that happen.
Yeah, that's what I've had happen 3 times now. With the autosave.
That is your cursed game.
And it's one of those things too. It's like sometimes when a game comes out, there's going to be some glitches that will affect some people that there's not going to be a way to fix, and that's. Like, if there's a massive glitch that is affecting literally everybody, that's bullshit.
So, like, Fallout 4, when I started looking at the mods, the number one that everyone recommends it's called the official Fallout 4 mod. I think that's the exact name. And it fixes, like, 20,000 known glitches that Bethesda just refuses to fix themselves.
All right, well, if Bethesda's just not going to fix it, then that's a different story.
But that is what Bethesda does. Every game they've ever made, they just release it. It's totally fucked up, and they refuse to do anything about it.
That's a different situation.
Yeah. That's entirely the fault of the developer.
Yeah, Bethesda hasn't had a great track record recently.
No, all of their good faith is gone. Because did you ever look into Yang Ye and his following of Fallout 4? Followed the whole shenanigans. You should check it out. There's a literally YouTube video called The 1001 Glitches of Fallout 4. And they're staggering glitches. They're fucking shocking. Man. Yeah, so I have no faith left in Bethesda. They just destroyed a decade of goodwill.
Yeah. Well, like when they came out, like Oblivion was an amazing game, and there were some glitches, but like,
one of the best games ever made. It's still, in my opinion, the best RPG ever made.
And the thing is, like now with Oblivion, some copies had glitches at certain areas, and like one of my friends, he had a problem. He played the entire game, no problem, but there was one glitch he had when he tried to do the final quest of the Grey Fox, like the Thieves Guild quest line. It glitched out.
Like the Grey Fox isn't in the house or something like that, right?
No. What would happen was the Grey Fox would come up and talk to him, and then after the Grey Fox walks out of the door, there's a moment where you can't see her HUD or anything like that. You just walk out. When the Grey Fox leaves, you're supposed to go back into the normal gameplay, and it just doesn't. It stays stuck in there. But that's a glitch that my brother's never had that problem. That's a glitch that some people get. And for me, the first glitch was in the Shivering Isles, one of the dungeons. Once I got to a certain point, it was at the first quest where you couldn't go back to the main area, because after a certain point in the Shivering Isles, you can't go back until you finish the Shivering Isles.
Yeah.
And it was just when I crouched, it would say something could see me the entire time, and if I tried to open any menu, it just
I've had that, or it says you're permanently being followed by an enemy. You're in range of an enemy, so you can't fast travel, you can't sleep, you can't do stuff like that.
And this new one
is
just
all you can do is just turn it off, turn it back on.
This new one, the problem is it's not that there's game glitches; it's save glitches. I can't autosave, and that was a problem because I didn't realize I wasn't autosaving, so I wasn't manually saving for when I started. So you lost
a couple hours.
So I lost hours of gameplay, and it was just like, fuck, I'm done.
That's tough, yeah. That's tough with
And then
games.
I turned the autosave on. Within 10 minutes, file was corrupted.
There's games that have no autosave, like Stalker, for example, and it's tough because sometimes you'll really be on a roll and you'll be feeling strong and whatnot, and then you'll die, and you're like afraid to open the menu because you don't remember the last time you autosaved, and you look at it, it's like 38 minutes. You're like, fuck! Yeah. That was 38 minutes of hell, fucking fighting mutants and bandits and mercenaries and all sorts of shit, dodging grenades and stuff. God damn it.
Well, that's why with my game, I've been playing with my old PSP a little bit the past few days, and I found an old game on there that I really enjoyed playing, but my PSP doesn't have the battery, and the connection, the power cord's a little finicky, so if I see a save point, I use the save point.
Yeah. You have the Switch, right?
I do.
It's pretty awesome.
It is good. For me, it's just, I haven't used it in a while. One of my controllers is busted, but in the beginning, I got the Switch and I really enjoyed those games. But then after that, I was just like, I started playing some computer games and stuff like that, but they just don't have.
So let me ask, if we get a 4-player Warhammer going, who should we pick? What would be a good 4-player complement?
That is a question you'd have to ask Jerry, because like I said, I've still only played the High Elves.
Well, you've played a lot of it, right? That you've played almost a full campaign or so?
Yeah. Well, no, I've conquered about a whole continent.
Okay, so you have a fair understanding. You have the same understanding I have of the game, because I did the same thing. Yeah. I conquered about 1/3 of the world and then stopped. My Lizard Man campaign. So who would you want to be?
I want to be the dwarves. Or the Tomb Kings.
Tomb Kings.
Because I want to be a group that has some kind of crafting system. The elves are a little bit dull. Like I love playing with archer heavy groups, but that's just because that's in almost any game with archers. That's unless the archers are pitifully weak,
they're not very good.
Yeah, like unless the archers are pitifully weak, you're going to be just crushing anything if you have a lot of archers. Because like when I play as the High Elves, like it's like 3 or 4 units, 3 to 5 units of infantry that just sit in front of my archers, and the rest of them is
they're like 35 units of archers.
Then I'll have a bunch of units of archers, and then like maybe a couple units of cavalry and stuff like that.
So cheesy.
Yeah, but I'll usually have like 10 units of archers.
That's good. I love cheese. I'm playing the Skaven right now in our most recent co-op that we just started last night, and eventually I'll just have entire 20 stacks of Hellpit Abominations.
Yeah.
Why not? A 20 stack of H-bombs and a 20 stack of rat ogres.
Well, Jerry was saying he watched a guy play the High Elves online, and he had the Sisters of Avalorn, and they shoot the exploding arrows.
Yeah.
And he said he just had a group with a full 20 stack of those following another army around of just a little bit of infantry, and he just crushed things.
So cheesy, but I love cheese. That's what these games are for.
Yeah.
Because you're forced to play, not realistically, but conservatively for so much of the game. And then when you get into the later stages of the game, when you control a third of the map or half a map, that's when you can start having fun.
Yeah, well,
when
that's
you have
the
a
whole
large
point.
financial surplus.
When you have a huge financial surplus,
Yeah.
what's there left to do? Because you could build a dozen armies that are all balanced and right, or you could just build one like that's just overpowered and have fun.
I started doing that with my Lizardman campaign. Just started doing every 20 stack has 10 T-Rexes in it, Carnosaurs. They're actually not that good.
No?
they get surrounded and killed pretty easily with spearmen, and so like I started.
Spearmen are pretty good against the large.
Yeah, they're anti-large, and so I started doing that. I did that for a couple of battles, and the battles were way closer than they should have been. You know, fighting like a big group of orcs or something like that, it should smash them if I had a well-balanced army. But send all the Carnosaurs in there. It looks really cool at first, and they really fuck up the lines, and they cause a lot of chaos. Then they get surrounded and killed.
Yeah, once they're surrounded, there's not much they can do.
Yeah.
I still haven't done it, and I think I might just load up one of my old campaigns to do it. But just because I was talking to Jerry, I can't do 20 stacks of dragons because you have to have a unit that is forced to be on the ground. You can't have all aerial units, so I'd have to have the commander's just on a horse, and then all the dragons come rushing in.
Do it.
40 dragons. That's gonna be fun.
I've tested it in the skirmish battles. The star dragons beat anything in the game. Yeah. 20 star dragons beats anything.
I'm gonna go with 40.
Yeah, that's the way to go. That's a good policy. The Skaven are so overpowered, it's insanity.
The new one, or
yeah, the new one. The old ones are worthless.
Yeah, well, what Jerry was showing me with the new ones, and what he was describing, that nuke ability they have is ridiculous.
Not only that, but the Undercity is fucking ridiculous.
That's a new thing.
No, I think the Undercity was an old thing, but previously they didn't have good enough units to really make it worthwhile. Like, your units were pretty shit. But now, not only can you sort of rely on your units, but you have really powerful ranged units that complement powerful melee units. You have a more well-balanced army. But in a campaign I'm playing single player right now, I'm at turn 215 and I have 185 Undercities.
That's wow.
Yeah, and I'm purposely ignoring the elves in the middle. My plan is to release the Vermintide. Do you know what that is?
You mentioned the other time. It's
you build a building in the Undercity. It's a 2-stage building, so it's a 6-turn process. So it's a long process where you can be discovered during that time.
Yeah.
But then if it finishes it, a full stack of Skaven spawns and in the province to attack the city. And through your research, you can make the stack stronger and stronger. I have all the research done, so it's a full 20 stack now of the best troops.
So, yeah, I remember you mentioned your plan is going to be you're going to build one under every city?
Yes. So my plan is I'm going to Undercity the entire map except those elves in the middle on the island. And then all at once, I'm banking up money right now. I have 850,000 gold in the bank. I'm going to wait until I have about 2 or 3 million. And then I'm going to...
How much are you making per turn?
20,000.
Oh, no.
I'm going to Vermintide the whole world all at once. And spawn 100 armies.
That would be because even if let's say half of them get stopped by the city.
I did a little test.
Yeah,
I did a test of about 40 cities. And in my tests, of the 40, maybe 30 of them successfully vermitided. The other 10 were discovered and taken off, taken away. In all the most major cities, they discovered them.
But I mean, it doesn't matter if you get 2 other cities that get
and then
stack.
Of that 30, about 25 of them won their battles. Maybe 20, 25. The other ones were facing too large of an armies to defeat.
But I mean, even if
so then, just like that, with the snap of my fingers, I had 20 cities under my control. And I had 20 hurt, damaged armies just walking around.
Yeah, and all you got to do is because if you've got a 4-city province and 3 of them had successful Vermintides, you just now combine those armies into merge troops, merge units.
Yes,
and then just merge them all up, and then take 2 armies and make them into 1 army. And
the one thing I'm realizing though is because I've been focusing on making money with my undercities this entire game so far. And I've just been ignoring food because once you get down to 0 food, you can't go less than 0. Right. But what you're doing per turn can go negative. I got up to negative 550 food per turn, which is an insane amount. And the problem is that the strongest, I would say the strongest advantage that the Skaven have is that you're able to colonize a city at any level of the city. Yeah. So you can walk into a ruin and colonize it at level 5 if it's a capital city. Yeah, if you have the food. And that's the problem. When I have 0 food, I can't capitalize on taking cities.
Well, that's what I remember we were talking about this the other day, and all you got to do now is you built a bunch of undercities focused on gold.
Yeah, switching over.
You just need to switch over.
So I've got it down to a negative 180 food from negative 550.
Yeah, that's all you need, because you're still going to be waiting for a few turns to get some money. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you're getting plus food, you're good.
Yeah, I would like to have maybe plus 40 or 50 food turn.
Yeah.
Because I can only bank like 300 food, so it's not that much. And it costs like 150 food to go to a level 5 city. So it's going to be tough to settle all those cities.
I'm kind of, I'd have to buy the new expansion, and I'm not playing enough to
justify that. Yeah.
There's a bunch of other expansions that Jerry has bought me just so that he could play his expansion when we play together. I like the game, but I'm not as into it, and I don't have the time to commit to it as what Jerry does.
A little louder.
Sorry. Let me sit up.
But yeah, I'm not as into the game as Jerry, and I just don't have the time to commit to the game that Jerry does.
Yeah, I understand. I don't either, honestly. And I wasn't that into it when I was playing the other races. I mean, I was playing the Lizard Man. I got to like maybe 1/3 of the map, and then I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm bored.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, too, for me. Like, once the game gets to the point where I know that I'm just going to sweep the map and there's really nothing that can stop me anymore.
Well, it's not that I knew I was going to sweep the map in that one. It's that the game is too finicky. Like, it was like at turn 300 when I had 1/3 of the map, but I could have had what I had at turn 150. But multiple times, an enemy army got into my territory and they refused to fight me, and I can't catch them because the AI can run farther than you can. And so I have armies chasing enemy armies that are just going from city to city, raising every city. And when you're not the Skaven, when you can't settle at level 5, the enemy AI can just spend 1 turn, attack a city, and they can send it all the way back down to level 0. You might have just spent 100 turns developing that city, and it's gone now. It's gone permanently. And you can settle it again, but it's now level 1 with no buildings. And it's such a knockback. It's unbelievable. So that happened to me once.
That's why one of the things I've done.
One big army got into my territory. Sorry to cut you off, but from the Dread Fleet.
Oh yeah, the Dread.
And they just walked right past my armies, and then I couldn't catch them because they can run farther than me because they're AI, because the computer gets all these bonuses. And they swept like 30% of the way through my territory. They ruined like 20 cities. I probably only owned like 60 or 70.
Did you have any
garrisons?
Garrisons,
yeah, but it doesn't matter. The Dread Fleet's replenishment is so crazy. They have a full stack army again in like 2 or 3 turns. Mm-hmm. So as they're running away from me, like even if I fight with a garrison, first of all they have like 6 Necrofax Colossus. This is a full stack of the best possible units. Mm-hmm. So even a full stack of garrison is not going to do anything against them. I ended up having to bring 2 full stacks against this 1 stack to beat it. And those 2 stacks that were designed to fight this stack. They were specifically anti-large and anti-artillery armies. However, the garrisons don't matter because it doesn't matter how injured they are. They just come back to life. Even though they're in my territory, even though they're walking through a desert or a jungle or a swamp, it doesn't matter.
They don't suffer attrition?
Dude, maybe I'm playing on hard difficulty, I don't know. But the computer just has so many ridiculous buffs that I definitely don't have. When I'm in an area, enemy territory, and my army's injured, it says it's going to take like 6 or 7 or 8 turns to heal. When the Dread Fleet comes into my territory, and maybe this is just a Dread Fleet thing, I can knock them down where like all of the units are at half HP, and then they're back up at full strength in 2 turns. And they're moving in that same time, moving farther than I can move while I'm chasing.
So they're not encamping or anything?
No, they're not encamping.
That's weird.
And so they just go from city to city, wiping out every single city. And then I literally have to get in front of them and be where they're going to be in order to catch them. I can't just run behind them.
That's crazy.
So it's pretty infuriating. And so I don't get like a drive to play the game. I don't get a motivation when it feels like my gains are so fragile. Like in the other Total War games, like Rome, which is the classic, of course, I think it's harder to take ground. It's harder to make progress in the game, but the progress is more solidified.
Yeah, it's hard for them to take it from you too.
They can't just run through your territory and obliterate everything.
And the thing is too, I like one thing that Rome has that this one doesn't is just the city design. Like when you're attacking a city in Rome, you're attacking a city. Yeah. You're not attacking a single wall of a city. And like some of these places, the description of these cities is that it's this massive, huge, sprawling city,
and they'll have it in the background, like the art in the background of the map, off the edge of the map where you're not allowed to go. You'll have this giant, sprawling city that you can't access.
And it's like, that's because this is exactly how it would work. You'd have this one army attacking this tiny little bit, and you're fighting up. It was just like,
fuck you, Creative Assembly.
I want to see the full city.
Yeah, anyone who's listening right now who worked on. Who works on modern Total War games, especially Warhammer 2, you're a piece of shit. I really don't like you. I think that you did a very, very bad job. And if you'd like me to, you can send me an email. I will give you a list of 10,000 problems with Warhammer 2. There's so many features that just don't exist that have existed in every previous Total War game. What was their reasoning for taking them out?
Yeah.
We don't want the players to have too much fun. God damn it, Total War.
Yeah.
One of my biggest problems with playing the dwarves, I would love to play the dwarves, but if I can't actually defend dwarven mines and halls and giant underground cities, then what the fuck is the point?
Yeah. If also, the dwarves just look like the elf cities, why do I care?
Yeah. There's literally no difference. And again, you can see them in the background. When you're playing in one of the dwarf cities, in the background of the map, there's this giant sprawling dwarf network of tunnels and shit like that, but you can't access any of it. You can't fight in it. No. You can't build your defense around it. Can you imagine though if you could,
like there was a procedural battle where you had like to take one of the dwarven cities, it was like 3, like you'd have to take like the outer wall, the inner one, and then move on to the
imagine if it was a staged battle or like in stages where let's say I'm orcs and I'm attacking a dwarf city. I need to take the above ground fortifications, then I need to take the inner workings, and then I need to take like the tunnel passages, and then it's the actual dwarven city. And each one of these is like a whole turn worth of fighting.
Yeah. Like a battle that you need to once you get the outer walls, you can sit down, you can have a low replenishment rate or something like that.
Yeah, you can encamp.
You can encamp.
And whatever. What about when you release Vermintide? Even though it's an undercity, it's a city that exists in the sewer network of the other city, your army doesn't spawn in their city. Your army spawns on the outside of their city. It's a normal siege battle.
Yeah.
Creative Assembly, for things like that, and the fact that when there's a naval battle, when two armies meet at sea, they when you go into the battle, they're just on land. You can be in the middle of the ocean and there's just like a random territory chosen, like you're in the middle of the fucking desert all of a sudden. Fuck you, Creative Assembly. Suck my dick. How dare you sell that product, and how dare you charge such a ludicrous amount of money for it?
Yeah, that is one
That's
thing.
That's a $5 game.
Warhammer 2 is far too expensive.
It's a $5 game. And
I wouldn't go that far. But...
No, fuck them. Oh my god. You know what Creative Assembly is? Or what Warhammer is? It's a cash grab.
Oh yeah, I can see.
Creative Assembly looked at their development team and they're like, okay, to make a real Total War game like Medieval 2 or Rome, it's going to take this many people and it's going to take this much time. Okay, we're going to decrease the amount of people working on the project by half, and we're going to give you 1/4 the amount of time. And one of the developers, one of the artists, raised his hand and was like, but then we can't do any of the things that make Total War. And the guys in charge are like, yeah, that's right, fuck you.
Like that thing.
And fuck everyone who buys it as well.
Like the meme where it's like, where the guy puts his hand up and says something, gets thrown out the window.
Yeah, that's 100% what's happening at Creative Assembly. They're just executing all the people who give a shit about their games. I mean, I just can't... I think I spend too much time bitching about Creative Assembly. It's just because I love their games so much. And I just wish they would try. Yeah. I just wish that they would try.
Because it's one of those things, they're making a game that's got a lot of aspects, and it's really awesome, and for a casual player, they may never ever know that about any of the things that you're complaining about right now.
Yeah.
But for anybody who knows these games, you're just sitting there, and that's the thing too. any of the problems. Like, there are going to be some games, like, there are probably some problems in a Total War game that cannot be fixed without breaking the game.
The troops don't even have formation options.
Yeah, that's one thing.
They don't have loose formation. They don't have close formation. They don't have hold ground or defense or aggressive stance. Come the fuck on, Creative Assembly. That goes back to, like, fucking Red Alert. That goes back to Command and Conquer. Fucking Warcraft 1. Get your fucking head out of your ass.
Age of Empires had that.
Yeah. How do you just go into the real-time strategy genre and just axe things that everyone's expecting and everyone needs in order to have the experience?
And it's one of those things like, okay, if you're going to do that, and because you're going to go in a different way or in a different, but they didn't go in a different direction. They just didn't have those things.
Yeah, they just excluded it.
Yeah.
They don't have hot seat.
Yeah, that is an atrocity because, like, this kind of game should absolutely have hot seat. And I hate the idea that if you are playing a game with your friends, you can only fight or together or against each other.
Yep, or there's only co-op or head-to-head.
Yeah.
So there's no, for people who don't know, co-op means we have to work together. There's no option. Head-to-head means we have to fight. There's no option. So there's nothing in between. So there's no possible situation when you and your friends are playing where you can be allies one turn and enemies the next turn. And these campaigns, fucking, they take dozens and dozens of hours. We're talking about hundreds of turns. Pardon me. We're talking about hundreds of turns of gameplay here. And there's at no point can I change how I feel about my allies. Fuck off, Creative Assembly. So yeah, anyway, just had to make a little pause there, a little pee break. So we were talking about head-to-head versus the co-op thing. Why do you think that they make decisions like that? They're so obviously not what the players are going to want.
I think sometimes they make a decision, like they'll take something out and then they'll piss off players. That way they can put it back in later and then charge money.
God, that's horrible.
Because there's things out there, and like it's something that companies have done before where like something new's coming out, and so they will with a new version, like let's say for example, like I remember Windows Movie Maker, can't find that anymore.
Nope,
it's completely gone because the new version is apparently going to have some video editing software, and so they wanted people to get that instead of Windows Movie Maker. And it's just like, you know what, that's just so underhanded, like just to take it away because you're going to release something else and you want people to pay money. Like, I get you want to sell your product, but it's not like any of these companies are hurting for money.
And that's slightly different in the sense that Windows Movie Maker was always free.
Yeah.
For years and years. It's different if you buy a product expecting it to be a certain degree of quality, and then what you end up finding is a completely half-assed attempt just because they want to piece it out.
Well, it's like hot seat is one of those things. How, if you've had it in past games, and this is a game that is designed, like the campaign is great and all, but a lot of people are going to want to play multiplayer. How can you not have hot seat? Like, it does not make any sense to not have hot seat. That's a huge thing. It's a huge spit in the face of the people who like to play that game.
It is. And I'm reading up about what you can do to counteract that. And apparently you have to use some kind of mod or something. You have to edit the files in order to be able to do things like hot seat.
So basically, if you want to be able to do some of these things that you should be able to do, you have to be able to be a coder.
Yeah. You have to go in and code your own fucking game. God damn it. You know, the number one thing that upsets me is just when they take something away that already existed in the other games that everyone liked.
For no reason. Like, It's one of those things. They didn't take it away. Like, if they'd come out and said, look, we took this away because no matter what we did, we couldn't get the game to work with it.
Yeah, if it was breaking the game.
Like, for some reason it causes massive instability, I'd be like, all right, fine. And they're like, we're going to keep working on this. But they don't. They just take it away.
It's just gone. It's just gone. Oh, man. I'm really hoping... I think it's important that we all support indie developers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's important as a gamer, from a philosophical point of view. I think it's important to go on Steam, go on Good Old Games, all these portals, look for indie developers, find somebody you really like, and support them.
Yeah, like, of course, don't just support any indie developer.
Yeah, of course. Make sure they're worth it.
I have seen a couple people on YouTube talk about it, and they just support a bunch of indie developers, even the ones, and it's just like, no, like, support the games you like, because if you don't, like, if you start supporting everyone, one, you're going to run out of money, and two, like, it's not going to be, like,
if you really support the people you really like, and if everyone does that, then the market will determine what is good and what is bad. And theoretically, the low quality shit should fail.
I think there'll still always be like companies that are screwing around, like, you know, Bethesda and all them. They're gonna still be there for a while. Bethesda. Did I say Bethesda?
You said Bethesda.
Bethesda. I always say that. Like, Bethesda.
We should start a company called Bethesda.
Bethesda.
And our company should just sell the game fixes for all the Bethesda games.
What was I saying? I've totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Something I researched a little while ago is, can modders get paid for modding games?
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Nope.
No,
they cannot. So Mod Nexus, or Nexus Mods, one of the biggest mod websites, started including an ability where you can tip modders. So it's not like you're paying them directly for a mod.
you're just tipping them.
You're like tipping them or donating, you know? But they have to make it like a very convoluted point system where you're like tipping them in like Nexus mod account points, and if they have enough points, they can redeem it for cash of some kind or some bullshit like this.
Like, on the one hand, I get that there has to be a level of security for the companies, but sometimes these companies, like, especially like Nintendo is a perfect example. Nintendo goes out of its way to crush any modding, like, Nintendo is the only company allowed to work on its games. Anyone else, like, you are not allowed to touch their games. And, like, there's some things that Nintendo and Square Enix too. Square Enix is another one. Like, there's some things that people have done. They have made beautiful, amazing games, like Chrono Trigger, one of the
very famous game.
And there was supposed to be a second game. There was kind of a second one that it was just one of those games where it's like, oh wait, this is related to Chrono Trigger. I had no idea because it's completely different. The story, like, nothing to do really with the game, but there was some people who went and they made a game that was like 2 or 3 times bigger than the original Chrono Trigger, and it included, like, it was following the same story. It was massive, and when they got the cease and desist from Square Enix, they were like, look, we've almost finished everything. We'll give it to you. You can sell it. You don't even have to put our names in it. Just please let this be a thing. And they still wouldn't take it. Like, they literally went to them with a piece of paper saying, this is completely the property of Square Enix. We hold no ownership. We just want this to exist. And they shut it down. And so the game was closed. It doesn't exist. And another thing was someone went and did a 3D remake of Chrono Trigger. Complete, like, the same game in 3D. They did it all on their own. And again, they offered to give it to Square Enix, and Square Enix just took it, like, just shut it down and destroyed it.
Why do you think that is?
I honestly cannot find a reason, because if someone's going to hand this to you and say, look, you can use this and we won't ask any money from you. Like, you can just have it and sell it and people will pay money for it.
But I mean, I've seen that happen in my own life. I've seen people in business meetings and such, I've seen them walk away from money that was just essentially free money. It required nothing on their end. Okay. And they just walked away from it. I don't understand it either. It seems like
if someone came to me,
business.
If someone came to me and was like, look, and I'm a game company, and they're like, look, here's this game. You don't have to spend money developing. We've done all the development for you, and we just want it to exist. You know what? I'd even give each of them $1,000 and be like, thank you. And because it's nothing. It's literally, it costs you nothing. It would be nothing, even if you gave these people a little bit of money, it would be nothing to you for something that could be a huge, like, especially Chrono Trigger. If they came out with Chrono Trigger 2 and it was 3 times the size of the original game and it was amazing and all this stuff, it would be a huge cash cow. It gets so much money from that. And I mean, especially today, think about it. They could release that, and then there'd be a new wave of people going, wait, what's Chrono Trigger? And then Chrono Trigger would come back, and then they could pull that other one and be like, hey, guess what? We got a new 3D remake of the original game. You know, like, it's just, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. Even if there's something they could tell me and be like, from a business standpoint, I'd still be like, no, that's still
Still.
I can't understand it either. I've been at business meetings where, somebody is all they want to do is like use a logo from another business, and they're offering them you. Obviously, I don't want to get into the specifics here, but we might be talking about a business that is worth nothing, and they just have a name that people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And so, how much that name is worth is extremely questionable. It's arguable that it's worth anything, really. And I've seen so many people walk up and be like, hey, can we just put your name on the front of our business and we'll give you 10%, 20%. We'll give you this much money just straight up. We'll give you this much per month. And I've seen people just go, no, thank you. No, I'll just walk away from that. Yeah, my business isn't making any money, but I'll just walk away from this free money here.
And I think in some cases, like if you're talking about that on like a small business scale, I think it'd be like people going, no, there's pride. You could probably find a pride angle in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's certainly what it is.
And for me, I'll be honest, pride for me, like the general idea of pride and what a lot of these people have, there's far too much stuff that is encompassed in pride.
I concur. I agree.
Because like for me,
it's not a terribly useful.
It's horribly
emotion.
Yeah, and like I can totally understand being proud of things that you've done.
Well, that's not the problem. Most people are proud of bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit. And the
person I'm referring to was extremely proud of his business, and his business was an utter failure in all measurable ways.
Yeah, like if I had a business, whether it's doing well or not, if someone's like, can we put our...
It was multiple years old. It hasn't made a single fucking cent. It doesn't even have any costs. It doesn't pay any employees. It has nothing. It has nothing. It does nothing. It's just literally a name. And it's a name in an extremely small community. It's not even like a international brand. So I don't know where you're getting your pride from, dude, but...
That's the thing. If someone came up to me, as long as their business is reputable, even if their business if they go out of business in 6 months, if they're going to be giving me 10% of whatever they made in that 6 months, fine.
Shit, man. Well, 10% of theirs is definitely going to be more than zero.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just can't understand... This gets back to the conversation we were having earlier with foreigners in China working full time. I just can't understand it. I can't understand why anybody looks at anything except like how much you make relative to your effort.
Yeah.
I think so many people in the world are obsessed with just the number, and everything else doesn't matter. The number is what matters. It doesn't matter if they work 100 hours a week or 1 hour a week. All that matters is how much they get at the end of the month. That is the furthest thing from my mind. What matters to me is how much money am I getting relative to effort?
Yeah.
Because I've done that job before where it's just maximum effort, and it's not worth it. Where you're working 14 hours, 15 hours a day. It's not worth it. They're never going to pay you enough money for you to be happy that you spent that time there.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Like,
have you ever washed dishes?
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Yeah.
There's no amount of money a restaurant could pay to make that job worth doing that wouldn't bankrupt the restaurant.
Yeah. And
so restaurants are forced to hire new dishwashers constantly because the old ones quit because they can't keep doing that job.
Because it's a terrible job.
Yeah. So
that's why they generally have a bunch of like 14-year-olds doing it or something like that.
Yeah.
Also means that you're probably going to have someone who's not doing a very good job.
Exactly. That's the worst, when someone just does a bad job and you have to redo it.
Well, I hate that.
It's infuriating. But anyway, yeah, for me, it's all about effort. How much effort do you want from me? And that's where I need to justify the cost, the payment.
Yeah.
I'm always willing to accept a very small amount of money as long as they expect a very small amount of effort. I think that's a perfectly reasonable trade.
Yeah. If you're expecting me to do all this stuff and then it's like, I'm only going to pay you this much, it's like, no. You want a deal on this. Sometimes there's helping out a friend. Like, there's certain other currencies, if you will, that people can use, like helping out a friend for like a slightly less price or something like that. But then there's also times where it's just like, this is ridiculous.
Here I work between 5 and 10 hours a week. Depending on my part-time. So let's call it 7. In America, I would work about 70 hours a week, including commuting.
Right.
Hour there, hour back. I make half as much money here as I made there. So I work 1/10 the hours, I make half as much money. So that's a massive upgrade in my mind. But for most people, all they want to know is how much money did I make per month when I was in America? And they say, well, how much do you make now? And they go, oh, well, why would you take a lower paying job? And I'm like,
I only work 10 hours a week.
yeah, I'm like, wait, how did you hear a lower paying job from that information? I don't understand how you got to.
Because the only
that
reason you're
part.
making half as much is because you're not working. You could fill all, like you could
Oh,
work
yeah.
the same amount of hours.
Yeah, if
and
I
you're
worked
making
70
10
hours
times
here,
as much.
if I worked 70 hours here, I'd make a lot more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're making half as much for much less work, and then using that time to build other things that are just not making money right now.
Yeah. I've also had a lot of failed business and such here. Ah, yeah, don't remind me. So disappointing. That's a good story to tell sometime. Another podcast, maybe next week.
Yeah, next week we can do that.
Yeah, the GEG, that was a tragedy. Ah, yeah. Still a great idea, I think, though. If you ever want to do it, I'm in. I'll be your man in America.
In America.
If that's required. Yeah.
Getting visas for all my students.
More like just being online and playing with them in the middle of the night.
That could work too.
Yeah. And refusing to speak Chinese. You can just tell them, I don't speak Chinese, so force them to speak English.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a good place to end this.
I think so. Yeah,
Thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Always great having you on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. The episode of Bullshit in Video Games in the books. Do all that good stuff down below. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Catch you in the next podcast.
See ya.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
How am I gonna find man I'm supposed to be? The man I am ain't the